he described Chris. He said, your son Chris is here. And he said, Chris acknowledges you're wearing the bracelet he gave you. And Chris is acknowledging that you were planting something in his grave recently. And that's the moment, Kimberly, I went from believing to knowing. And I never looked back.
Welcome in. I'm Kimberly. I'm so glad you're here today. The guest that I have for you is so interesting and fascinating. I can't wait to dive in. But before we get started, if you're enjoying this content, make sure you click that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. And if you'd like to keep track of what's going on in this crazy planet right now, but you feel a little overwhelmed, you might want to sign up for our Friday morning email newsletter. It comes out every Friday morning. We try to include what we feel are the big happenings on the planet as we move towards the new Earth. It's super free, super informational. I think you're going to love it. Just click the link in the description box down below. Today's guest is near and dear to my heart. This gentleman lost his son, Chris, in 2016, but has been able to develop his gifts to the point where his son and him have now written 2 books together. I'd like to welcome in Joe McQuillen. Hi, Joe. How are you?
Hi, Kimberly. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, I am so grateful that you've taken the time to do this. I am very fascinated to hear about your story, particularly the process that you went through to connect with Chris.
Well, I'm happy to share it and happy that any parents or anybody who's lost, any significant loved one, any gap, can kind of follow in the footsteps that I followed.
Mhm.
Believe me, none of this is original, that I followed to help connect with the people that we love, the souls on the other side.
And I think it's such a wonderful lesson because you probably weren't a woo-woo guy before this happened.
Look at me. Look at me, Kimberly. I got a bent nose. I got a crew cut. I hung up my hockey skates about 5 years ago. But now I wear mala beads and I align my chakras. Who would have figured?
Who would have figured? So it's definitely available to anyone who wants to connect.
If I can do it, Kimberly, anybody can. And I mean
Yeah,
that with all sincerity,
yeah.
with all sincerity.
And that's why you have such a wonderful story. Why don't you take us back to the night that Chris transitioned?
So it was right after Christmas of 15 and 2015. And my son was 21 years old. He was home from college. He went to college at Northern Illinois University, a couple hours from the house. And for the last weekend, he and all his high school friends got together at one of their friends' lake houses, about an hour and a half north in Wisconsin, and Lake Beulah, and just kick up their heels for the last weekend before going back to school and kicking up their heels in school. I think. Um, so we were kind of my son, like me, was a bit of a wild colonial boy, and so we were happy he was going to be in this bucolic setting, up in Wisconsin. How's that for a term for a blue collar kid from Buffalo, New York? In this bucolic setting where it was going to be quiet and and eat, no driving, no big cities, just a local tavern, shooting pool, and then moving back to the one kid's house for the party to continue. They were all going to come back early Sunday morning. And I grew up a Bills fan. My son, even though was born and raised in the Chicago area, both my boys became huge Buffalo Bills fans. So we were going to watch the game the next day. So the next day I got up and set up for this game. And I'm texting my son. And I'm saying, hey, where are you, buddy? Kickoff's in an hour. And I get a text from the young man whose parents own the lake house, named Scotty. Scotty said, Mr. McHugh, Chris and 3 friends are missing. And so, I grabbed the Labrador, put on some hunting boots and a winter jacket and a couple of cigars, drive up north. And at the time, Kimberly, I really thought I was going to find him with a co-ed or a kegger at somebody else's cabin or something. And I wasn't all that concerned. His mom was. And I think moms have a little more intuition than we do, having born these children. So halfway up, I get a call, and it was from the young man's uncle who said, Mr. McHugh, I just want to tell you, it's no longer a research, it's a recovery. All 4 boys had drowned. Everything kind of went black for me, Kimberly. And as I was saying to you before the show, I'm a real responsible guy. Maybe a result of the first half of my life as a young man being kind of irresponsible. I'm hyper responsible. So, I knew that we had to get whatever had to get done. And I can tell you right now, I can look out my window here in my office that used to be his bedroom, which is a thin place for me. And I remember walking in that house and looking through the big picture window and seeing rescue boats and police cars and the sheriff's, patrol out there recovering our boys, and had to identify them. And, halfway up, when I got that news, it was funny. I got a message in my head. And about 15 years before I'd seen a medium, completely out of the blue, maybe a little spiritual awareness, maybe looking for an edge, who knows? But the reading was rather mundane. Get good gal. We're still friends. She's a good medium, author also. But there wasn't any urgency in there was no, need at that time. But she did say, your dad's here. And I adored my dad. And she said, he's holding a caboose and he's selling you railroad. Now, you got to understand, we were a railroad family. My dad worked on the railroad. My uncle worked on the railroad. My grandfather worked on the railroad. We had 5 boys, all worked on the railroad when they were in college. And I stayed on as a brakeman. So we were a railroad family. So that message was like, holy cow. And it wasn't verbose, didn't give me the, numbers to the lottery. It was just my old man, Iron Joe, telling me he was there. Now, 15 years later, I'm driving up to Wisconsin, and I recall that and said, wait a minute. We were a very clannish family, big Irish Catholic family. And I said, if Chris is gone somewhere and my dad's already there, he's with him. He's with my dad. And I thought, I just got to find him. And so from that moment, in between funeral arrangements and readings and, churches and tombstones and plots, I figured I need to find a way to find him, having very little background in this, right? As you said, I don't look like a woo-woo guy because I'm not, so when I finally got back after calling his mom and his godmother, who's in heaven with him now, I decided I got to figure some of this stuff out, I called the medium who I had talked to 15 years before, and she'd relocated to Arizona, but I had her phone number, and we talked, and she said, it might be a little early, but let me see what I can figure out here. And she told me about the accident. Nobody had known about it yet. She told me what happened, how they were horsing around, how somebody's shoelace. Now, these boys were all in this house, coming back after a night of carousing. And 4 of them went out 3 o'clock in the morning, saw a boathouse, layered clothing, untied Timberland boots, a snoot full of alcohol, and that bravado that goes along with being 21, right? And they jumped in a canoe and paddled out. None of them made it back, So, the bottom line is it was this perfect storm that caused my son to transition. It was only years later that I really figured out that he had signed a soul contract, and his path was what this was. And I'd signed a soul contract, and I wanted to renegotiate mine because I don't want one where my son's not with me, And I will tell you, for all the amazing metaphysical awareness that I have, I'd trade it all, be able to go play a round of golf and go get a pizza, right? But you can't unring that bell, right? It is what it is, So I started reading everything I could. I started going to lectures, about 6 months into it. So it was June 28th, 2016. I walked in. I read Bob Olson wrote a wonderful book about answers to the afterlife. He was an investigator, like a PI, from California, from LA. He wrote this amazing book. And so in that, I found a website, and I didn't even realize it was from the book. Years later, I looked at a website and saw this medium, Andrew Anderson, and he was not far from my house, maybe 25 miles. And so I figured, okay, I'm going to book a time because I want to see somebody in person. I talked to this Nancy, who was wonderful, but she was on the phone, and I wanted to look into the eyes of a medium talking to my son. Now, remember, I'm at a point here where I believe this. I don't know it yet, but I believe it. And it's part of me because I want to believe it. I'm wondering that myself, at that point. So I booked this time with this Andrew. But before I did, I had moved my son over one grave, which is a little crazy. But we bought a number of plots right after my son had transitioned. And we bought a number of them. And the woman who sold us didn't tell us that in this snow-covered ground that we were burying right next to another couple, even though we had 3 plots. So I was angry because he was my son, nobody else's. So in true McQuillen fashion, I moved him over 1 plot. And so it was this time, and so the ground was still loose around his grave. And so I'd reinterred him over. And by the way, that plot is mine now, and I'll occupy that one when it's my turn. And so I got some shamrocks on Amazon, shamrock seeds. So I figured I'd spread them around there that morning before I went and saw this medium. And before I left, I went in my jewelry box and pulled out this bracelet, just like a leather bracelet, and it says Dad on it. And Chris gave it to me. We were in Disney World when he was about 6. And I threw it in the dresser when I got home and hadn't thought of it. But I thought, let's grab that and put it on. So I did my thing at the grave, showed up at the mediums, and the medium said to me, your family was together. It was June 30th, actually. He said, your family was together last night on the 29th celebrating something. What was it? I said, well, it was Sally and my wedding anniversary, but we didn't exactly celebrate. He said, but your family did. He described Chris. He said, your son, Chris, is here. He said, he wants to acknowledge that you're wearing and I came in, with a, long sleeve shirt, like long sleeve polo, and the bracelet was underneath my cuff. And he said, Chris acknowledges you're wearing the bracelet he gave you. And Chris is acknowledging that you were planting something in his grave recently. And that's the moment, Kimberly, I went from believing to knowing. And I never looked back. It was an aha moment. Nobody knew this. My wife didn't know I was planting shamrock seeds. I'm not hiding it from her. It just didn't come up. I had just got them in Amazon and did it that morning at the grave. And I go to his grave all the time. There's another wonderful medium that I saw who said, do you go to your son's grave all the time? And I said, yeah. He said, most of the time when parents tell me that, I tell them, don't go there, because they really aren't there. He said, but I'm telling you to continue to go there because it's a great place for you to connect. And I've actually written a chapter in the second book about thin places where the veil is thinnest. So now I'm off and running. I'm in this, I've got this awareness. I take a trip to my best friend's wedding out in Sarasota, knowing nothing about Siesta Key. And after I ducked out of the wedding, showed up on a beach at 11, 12 o'clock at night, rolled up my khakis and lit a cigar and walked on the beach. And I just felt this overwhelming sense of him being there. I started crying. I started smiling. It was crazy, Kimberly. And later on, it was only later on that while writing the book, that I found out that Siesta Key sand is actually quartz crystal. It's 98%. They have drum sessions in the mornings. And I knew nothing. All I knew that I felt this electric, vibe through me, So I continued to search. I continued to seek. And I would come in here, Kimberly, wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning was kind of normal, a couple times a week. And I'd just come in this office. It used to be his bedroom. And I would just feel. I'd feel him, Later on, it evolved a little bit. I started listening to the guided meditations. I started sprinkling Siesta Key sand. Then I started, doing a chakra, aligning my chakras. And I felt close to him. Sometimes I swear I could have smelled him. And I know it is. It's, it's one of the clairs. And so on the first anniversary of this crossing, so it was, January 3rd, 3 o'clock in the morning, 2017, I come in here and I go through my routine, my pre-batting routine. And all of a sudden I started getting these messages in my head, and I pick up a pen and start writing. And what he's telling me is, you're not going to believe this, Pop. It's like a beach. It's beautiful, pink, warm. The colors are vibrant. It's warm. It's always warm. The air, the love everywhere. Nothing hurts, warm and happy. You're not going to believe this place. And I'm thinking, holy cow, Kimberly, have I just left the reservation? Am I doing this to try to put a patch on my broken heart, right? And I finished reading it. I finished writing. And it's dictation. People say to me all the time, why don't you ask Chris this? And I said, because when I'm with mediums, I'll ask them, and I'll talk to him all the time. Talk to him when I golf, when I go to the grave. I seek out places that I know that are thin places. Lilydale for one, Sedona, which wasn't a huge impact for me, but it is for others. I've had these amazing experiences, so I talk to him all the time, but this is a time for me to listen. That 3 o'clock in the morning, which still happens to this day. The last visit I had with him was February 31st. He and he came to me, when I was in Florida at his Aunt Marcia's house, and she's in heaven with him. And so I get these messages, and I write them down, and they've changed. A lot of it now is what he wants me to share with people listening to your podcast. How they should carry on with life, how they should handle things. So much has happened after that first year, through a series of wonderful situations. I spoke at Helping Parents Heal, and then met a phenomenal author who asked me to speak on her podcast. And it turns out she was a past life regressionist. And she said, "So what's on the horizon?" I said, "Well, Chris wants me to do past life regression." She goes, "Well, that's what I do." No idea. We did the past life regression. I trail the spots. I get messages from Chris. So the bottom line is, the wonderful author, Susan Giesman, name of one of her books is, Still Right Here, and that's the message, right? Your loved one, your child, your spouse, your significant other. I've had so much experience. Christopher has told me my sister Marcia was transitioning from cancer, and she had finally done everything she could possibly do. She's one of the finest people in the world, tough as nails. I worked for her when I was a young, rowdy, young 20-year-old, mid-20s, and I fear no man, but she scared the bejesus out of me that I would behave around her. But she was just this wonderful, the real source of love for me and a real source of love for my boy. On my birthday, the year after she transitioned in 19. And on my birthday, I went and saw this medium, Jill Nicole, and she said, "Chris is here, of course, but there's another woman." And he described my sister Marcia when she was in her 30s. To a T. He said, "She got the title of aunt, mother, sister, godmother." I go, "Yeah, that's Marcia." And she said, "She has a message for you." She said, "Did she call you Joey?" I said, "Yeah, she called me Joey." She goes, "Joey, thanks for the greatest gift." And what that meant was when Marcia was transitioning, a few days before, of course, she read my book, our book, when it first came out, but she would listen at night in hospice to just soothe her. And at one point she said, "Joey," she said, "you gave me the greatest gift. I read your book and I'm not afraid to die." And that from somebody who was a huge source of love for me. So Christopher promised that he'd be there the minute Marcia crossed. And this is an interesting thing. This is what I love about what I'm doing. I'm about ankle deep in the knowledge of what's going on after 7 years, of research. Uh, you know, and there's still so much to learn. And he said, "I promise I'll be there the minute Marcia crosses over." And then after he said, "I told you I'd be here," and she came here. So was Billy, Jerry, Bobby, Pat. So named all the siblings that are over. Big Irish family. That's what happens. And he said she joined the family. Then she had to go somewhere, like a spa. And when she came back, she was younger than when I was a kid. And it took me a while to figure that out, Kimberly. Was what happened is when she transitioned, her body stayed here with the cancer, but the trauma crossed with her. And you had to go somewhere to process that trauma, right? So if you've had experienced overdose or suicide or anything, when you go across, I don't believe in any punishment. I think there's a life review and a purging of whatever is painful or cause you to transition. I think that like a spa, he said. What a wonderful way to put it. So, these are the things that I don't look like I do, but I would involve myself with. One of my favorite quotes is from, and you wouldn't guess that that a guy who looks like me would y- 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 would quote Haruki Murakami, right? But Haruki Murakami said, and once the storm is over, you won't remember how you made it through, how you managed to survive. You won't even be sure whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain. When you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. That's what storms are all about. You've had your personal storm, Kimberly. I've had mine. And wouldn't it be a shame that we had to experience the physical loss of our children and not transform ourselves into a more spiritual creature? You know, so my message for your listeners is they're still here, but you got to do your part. You got to do what you can to connect with whoever you want to. It's like waiting around on a Saturday night for the phone to ring. It's not going to work, right? You got to do your work.
Yes.
And
You
that's my
know,
story, and I'm sticking to it, Kimberly.
yeah, you're sticking to it and you told it so beautifully. Thank you.
Well,
You know, the question that I think a lot of people are going to have is how did you separate and understand that what you were getting was Chris and not yourself? So how, and
great
it's
question.
almost like pulling a thread
Yes.
and it gets more substantial as you move along. So can you?
That's a great question. So, first of all, I was PO'd when Chris transitioned. I was mad. I was mad at the people who owned the house. There's no, I mean, it could have been anybody's house, but I had to be mad at somebody. I wanted to be mad at God. and I'd get on my knees each night after the first 3 nights at home. And I believed in God, but I didn't have a really close relationship with him. But I get on my knees and I say, thank you, God. Thank you for my family. Thank you for my sobriety. But we're not good, you and me. You took my kid, you know, 3 nights. The third night, I got a download that said, I didn't take your son. His recklessness and free will caused him to come home early, and I welcomed him. And remember, I lost a son too. At that point, I knew that God wasn't making me pay for my past sins. God wasn't pulling the rug out from under me. God was crossing his arms going, oh no, when my son chose to do what he do in this reckless manner. So the first reading I got from him, he was describing what heaven's like. He also said to me, you got to let it go, Pop. I love Scotty. He loved me. We were pals, right? Holding on to that resentment's not going to help you. Now, I wasn't ready. I'm Irish. They say Irish Alzheimer's you forget everything but the grudges. So, I was holding on to the grudge. They were wealthy. They didn't have enough discipline. They left the boat unlocked. They let the kids drink and do drugs, whatever. Which all nonsense, by the way. Um, and Chris said to me, "You got to let go of that." And I wasn't ready to let go, but I said, "Sure, Chris, for you, I'll let go of this." Fast forward 12 hours. I get a text. Sally and I were going to meet at the grave at sundown and launch a Chinese lantern. And I finally figured out how to do it without setting the whole place on fire. And then I get a text from some of his fraternity buddies who are family to us now. It said, "Mr. McHugh, we're going to meet at the grave. You want to join us around 2:30? So I thought, of course I wasn't going to work that day. So I threw a cooler in the back, a hockey cooler with Gatorade and beer and cigars and in a box and headed up there. And as I pulled in, I couldn't believe the amount of cars. I thought something was going on here. Some other graves. Well, when I got out there, 40 kids. They did that spontaneous coconut telegraph thing where they got, they all got the news and they all met there. And one of the first kids I saw was Scott. So instead of being uncomfortable or ducking him or resentful, I had made my peace because Chris asked me to the night before. And I was able to embrace him and tell him with all the honesty in the world, it wasn't your fault, man. It had nothing to do with you. You got to let that go. But I wouldn't have had that. He gave me that gift the night before. So that was probably the first time that I realized what he was telling me wasn't what I wanted. At one other time in reading, he said, I know getting this close to the other side scares you. And I thought, no, it doesn't. He's wrong. So the validation is he's not omnipresent. He's not God. He's just an evolved soul on the other side. So him being wrong about that was very validating for me. Like I said, I'm not afraid of the other side. I embrace it. I'm welcome. This is great. So those kind of things continued throughout, and things that he would tell me would then come to pass later on. Right. So it was, like you said, it was like a string of pearls that just kept, they just kept connecting. And early on, 6 months in, that experience with Andrew Anderson, who and I are still very good friends, dear friends. I'm going to his wedding soon. As a matter of fact, he's getting married. So a woman saw one of my interviews, read our book, called him for a reading when she was in Chicago from California. They started dating and now they're getting married. So it's all on Chris.
Oh, you're a matchmaker now too.
Yeah, you know what? Throw that on the resume, the card. And so the experience with him really solidified that medium's for real. Now I'm going to tell everybody, use referrals, right? I've never had the idea of people pulling strings and researching you is BS. These people are like healers and therapists. They just want to help you. But there's really good ones and there's average ones, and a lot has to do with how you connect with them, right? How you connect with them. I've had some Suzanne Giesman's amazing, John Edward crossing over. 200 people in the audience came over, said my son's name, his middle name, my grandfather's name, and said, "You wrote 2 books with Chris, didn't you?" It's like out of the blue, right? Rebecca Rosen. These people are the most stand-up people in the world. But I'd say if you're going to go to a meeting, go to somebody. If you're part of Helping Parents Heal, they have a website with the mediums that they recommend. John Holland has or Bob John, has a website for mediums. So go to refer. If anybody's interested, email me at jbmcquillen@gmail.com. I'll send you my people that I refer to because they're good at what they do and they've got wonderful souls. So that's when it went from, as I said before, believing to knowing. And once I crossed the knowing, I never looked back. I had somebody once asked me one time, it was probably the first interview I did. It was on a radio station in Dallas. And she said to me, "What do you tell people on the radio that just don't buy it?" I said, "I tell them change the channel." I don't care. I care about somebody who's lost a kid that's trying to connect. If this isn't for you, move on. Somebody also once said to me, "Aren't you concerned that people think, you're kind of flighty?" I grew up in this Irish Catholic family where all the neighbors hated us. We were 10 kids and dogs and football games and bicycles. And it was wonderful. It was most dysfunctional. When my sister died, one of her best friends, a psychologist, Don, and he said the McQuillens put fun back in dysfunction. And I was a friend of mine's cousin. We were talking, and she looked at me and she said, "You have the unassailable self-confidence that comes from a childhood insulated with love." So I knew I was loved. To this day, I know I'm loved. My family loves me. People, wonderful friends love me. So if somebody else doesn't get it or judges me for being involved in the metaphysical, it's fine. God bless. Wayne Dyer used to say that. Other people's opinion of me is none of my business, and that's how I live. Do you think I'm rounding third? I'm 67 years old. Do you think I'm going to spend time worrying about somebody else's opinion of me? No. So that frees me up, to go to the thin places, to do the past life regression, to do the numerology, whatever. Try it all, figure it out. Metaphysical. It's none of this is new age, as you and I talked about.
Yeah. And once you start down that path, it becomes so much more interesting than you ever could imagine. And the information that's available to us is fascinating. How did you work from, and I understand that the messages will start coming in and it's like you can just sit there and take dictation.
Yes.
Did Chris suggest the book or did you say, "Hey, let's put this in a book together"?
That's a great question. I got to tell you, you're nailing it. You're nailing it, Kimberly. So I had no intention of writing a book. What I was doing was taking these visits from Christopher, just like this, right? And a couple pages, 2-3 pages, handwritten. In the morning, I'm exhausted at night, either go back, take a nap, or, get up in the morning. I'm an early riser. And in the morning, I'd wake up and edit them while they were still fresh because my handwriting's horrific. The nuns would be disgusted. And so I edited them. Then I would put them in just a file folder according to date. And what I assumed, Kimberly, was I was going to be sitting on a rocking chair on a porch, reading these things just to feel closer to my son at some point, right? That was and the Greeks always say that Man plans and God's laugh, right? So I think there was always a plan. Nobody clued me into it for a bit. So I'd had this stack, and then when I would see a medium, I originally started taking notes, and then I started recording them all, and then I'd transcribe them and put them down handwritten in this file. And I was sitting on, walking out of my office here, and just Sally's brother, Ricky, who she adores, had come to visit, and they were talking about when Chris was young, 3 years old. He was tenacious, and he'd want to play hide and seek. So he'd hide behind the couch, and you'd find him, and he'd go hide again, and then he'd take off, and he'd hide again. So I heard that story, and I thought, wow, hide again. That's the story. I need to write this down. He's just hiding. I need to write this story. And I literally turned around, walked up the stairs, and started writing the first book. No idea what I was doing. I hadn't written a book. I really found out that I enjoy writing. I love it. And my writing style is very conversational. It's not flowery. One of the best compliments I ever had was that somebody said it's like sitting down having a coffee with this nice man, and so I had no idea where it was going. I had no idea how we were going to get it published. I knew that my job was to write, put it together. And I remember getting melancholy at the end when the first book, My Search for Christopher on the Other Side, was almost done, and thinking, what if this connection dissipates? What if this lessens? What if our job is done? And Chris literally came through and said, we're not done yet, Pop. We'll be doing this until you cross. So at that point, I knew that this wasn't going to stop. I was going to write until, I made the journey with him. And he told me what the journey is going to be like. He said, look, Bob, he said, for me, it was a learning curve. For you, it won't be because of all the information you're getting. He said, for you, it's going to be like walking through the woods and there's a stream and I'm on the other side. He said, I can't bring you over. You got to cross by yourself. But the minute you're there, you take that step, I'm there, Now, how bad does that sound? That sounds pretty good to me, And I'm not done here. I have work to do. I've got people to help. I've got people to love. I've got people that love me. I've still got to, work here on this side. But I will tell you that when the time comes and I get to tap on the shoulder and says, you're playing second base upstairs. It's like, I'm okay with that, because I led this life beyond my wildest dreams on this side. I got to be Christopher's dad on this side. And then I get to see him again when I make the crossover, the journey over. So I'm not looking forward to it, but I don't fear death in the least, And that was the name of the second book, We're Not Done Yet, Pop, My Lesson from the Other Side. And we're working on a third one, and it's called One Foot in Both Worlds. Right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that. And then we're working on a screenplay right now and searching for Christopher. And I'm, madly in love with the work.
That's going to be a fabulous movie.
It's going to be a fabulous movie.
It's going to be a fabulous movie.
I'm just brokenhearted that Treat Williams died because he would have been a good me.
Let's talk about techniques and skills that you've brought on board to manage the loss.
Yeah.
And, the one thing that I think anyone who's lost a child can say is it never gets easier. You just learn how to manage it better.
You just answered the entire question. Remember, there's a movie that came out called Manchester by the Sea, and the woman had lost a number of her children in a fire. And she had said to somebody, my heart was broken, it'll always be broken. So that's it. As long as you understand that, I live this really wonderful life. I love to golf. I'm with friends. I'm too old to play hockey anymore. I've got a wonderful wife. My children are terrific. Lovely family, just very fortunate. You have the greatest friends in the world. I've got this, wonderful life, but I'll always walk through life with a piece of my heart broken, and it's not going to heal. I say often that anybody who said time heals all wounds hasn't lost a child. Right. So how do I'm doing it right now. I'm not afraid of expressing my feelings. I don't care. Right. When it's time to cry, I cry. And it's like a tsunami, right? It takes you, pulls you off the beach, pulls you out, beats you up a little bit, throws you around the wake, and then dumps you back off on the sand. And usually in one piece, right? But it's when you resist that, when you try to hold in that grief, that you end up with a heart attack or a stroke or ulcers, you know. So when it's time to cry, I'm man enough to cry, you know. And when it's time to hug somebody else who's crying, I'm human enough to do that. You know, what I didn't realize, and it wasn't like I was a bad guy, you know, but I was a different guy before January 3rd, 2016. A lot more selfish, a lot more self-involved. And I realized that, you know, that's really, that's really not the pot at the end of the rainbow, you know. This gift that I got, I can connect with my son on the other side, you know, but I've got to give it away to keep it. You know, I can't hoard it. If I try to hoard it like buried treasure, I could lose it, and I'm not going to risk that. So whenever a Kimberly emails me or calls me and says, "Can you do this at this point?" or I get a call, you know, from uh, Elizabeth Bassan who said, "Hey, we have an opening for you. Can you fly out next week to speak with our group in Arizona?" I'm gone. I'm there, right? Because, you know, I've got this precious $1 million gift of spirituality and metaphysics. I'm not giving it back. You know, if all I got to do is share and help people heal a little bit, I'm going to do that. So my one advice is drop the rock, man. Let it happen. If the grief's hitting you, go. And if you're surrounded by people that love you, they'll embrace you. And if you're surrounded by people that don't love you, who cares? You know, let it out. Let it out.
Yeah. Can you talk to us now a little bit about how you develop the tools? And I know you have a whole page over on your website,
Yeah.
which is wonderful, and I'll have all that linked down below. But can you kind of walk through what's worked for you? Because I think it could be very helpful if someone's just looking for a little support in that first connection.
So first, I'm going to tell you, youngest of 10 kids, wild, spoiled, ADD, A-type personality, all of that. So when people say to me, you know, I really can't meditate, I just say, BS, you can meditate. If I can meditate, brother, you can meditate. And that's the key, right? I mean, I burn sage, you know, I align my chakras. While I land my chakras, I breathe in, hold it for 7 seconds. When I exhale, I say Christopher's name. If it's not for loss, then you can say God's name, right? Whatever God it is, it's God, Yahweh, the Great Spirit, whoever, you know, all the way up. And then you get yourself into a meditative state. And that's where the magic happens. Now you got to understand, our energy as human beings is low, and their energy as spiritual beings is high. So they've got to lower theirs, but you got to raise yours. I was doing a presentation one time, next town over, at the Wilmette Theater, and a woman said, you know, kind of snarkily, you know, my twin sister has been gone 4 years, and I haven't heard from her. And I said, well, what have you done? You know, what have you done to, you've read? Have you gone visit? Do you meditate? Do you call her name? Do you listen to guided meditations? You know, there's a wonderful medium called Medium Kareen. Her real name is Bobel, but Medium Kareen has a wonderful guided meditation. It's my favorite of all the guided meditations, and literally takes you where you're sitting there talking to your loved one. You know, so you know, try it all, right? You know, I tried the candle thing with the mirror. I didn't like it. Scared me. Took the, you know, broke through, threw it out. Took the mirror back to Best Buy. You know, it's like, but what is for you is for me. Now, I did a healing. I didn't like that either. My wife loved one. So, you know, it's all different things. And mine is almost all audible, right? Occasionally I've seen Chris, right? He's beautiful, but that's not the gift. When he had a third grade teacher used to say to him, you get what you get and you don't get upset. So I would love to be more clairvoyant, but I've got this amazing gift of clairaudience. So I'll take it, and I'm not going to be too greedy. And if you want to throw me a little clairvoyant now and then, I'm in, right? But how do I know about clairvoyant and clairaudience? I got off my butt and read. I researched. Where's this crazy book here? Idiot's Book for Communicating with Spirit.
Oh, who knew they had one of those?
So, you know, so reach out to me. You need help, you want a boost, you need some kind of, you know, ground level playing field, give me a call. right? Give me an email at jbmcquillen@gmail.com or look at my website at joemcquillen.net. And I'll call you back. We can talk about this. We could do a little guidance. That's what God wants me to do. That's my job these days, other than supporting my family, which I still have to do an occasional round of golf, which I do too. But
Yeah.
this is what I'm passionate to do.
I want to circle back about when you were talking about mediums, and I just want to share that my experience with mediums is they are some of the kindest, most gentle,
Yes.
most integrity driven.
Giving.
Yes.
My wife's a therapist, and it's the same kind of healing giving. I'll tell you a funny story about Sherry Jewell, who's a darling medium friend of mine. I just adore Sherry. We met, and we just hit it off. Rash, a little loud, so am I, and I adore Sherry. And she's got a great website. Look her up if you need a great medium. I was in Florida in Marcia's house, who'd been gone for a few years. And her and I just called her to say hello, and her, me, and my wife were going to go see John Edward when I got back. So we were just chatting. And she said, "Are you at Marcia's house?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Oh my God, Marcia's here." Marcia said, "Where's the keys?" Well, what happened is when I went to the week before, I had gone to Siesta Key. I was down for a couple months, and Sally came down and joined me. We spent a week on Siesta Key, which we adore. And I go out there late at night and do my thing. And when I left, I put the keys under the mat for the guy who comes in and cleans up, right? So she said, Marcia said, "Don't get locked out." So I went and looked at the keys. They weren't there. So I thought, oh, Marcia said, "Don't get locked out." So there was a master set of keys on a hook, and I put them in my pocket. And she said, "Marcia said, you brought one shell home for Siesta Key, and you put it on top of the picture of the cardinal you gave her." And I mean, it was exactly there, right? It was like, we're not on a Zoom call. We're on a cell phone, right? And then, so I put the keys in my pocket. I walked back out on the deck, and she said, "Marcia said, put the keys back on the hook." It's like, I mean, this entire unbelievable exchange of information from the other side through this amazing medium. And to me, it was really wonderful and heartwarming, but I wasn't that shocked by any of it. Right?
Yeah.
It's become commonplace to me, But once again, Kimberly, I don't believe in this stuff. I know it. There's a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And that kind of leads me to the question I have, the burning question I have, and that is, how has your perception changed about who we are, our place in the world, what we're actually doing here? You must have had a tremendous shift in what you believe to be reality.
Unbelievable shift. First of all, there was a great book that I'd read years ago, long before this tragic accident, and it became a wonderful movie called The Shack. And God in the shack is this woman, and guy had lost a daughter very violently, and God said to him, "Just because I work incredible good out of unspeakable tragedies doesn't mean I orchestrated the tragedies." I understood that only then. God didn't take my son. God didn't pull the rug out from under me. You know, God made some amazing good out of this horrific event that couldn't be undone, right? So my shift, my complete outlook to God changed. I have this wonderful relationship with this called Chris. He's referred to him as God, but he usually refers to him as the source, with the source, right? So I know there's a loving God that cares about me. And I know that there's my son's on the other side who's looking out for us. And he leaves us signs, crazy things. But I also know that I'm a citizen of this world. And I was one of those defiant, chip on the shoulder. Wasn't a bad guy, but certainly wasn't going to go out of my way, right? Now, God puts people in my way with cars pulled over that just wants me to check on his children, on his people. And I do. I live my life two ways, and this is entirely different than I did. I live my life to please my God and to make my son proud. Those two tenets, as long as I follow those two tenets, I can't go wrong. So that's the
Yeah.
big shift. I
Yeah.
lived before for me, and then what I produced, what I made, what I earned would then be able to, spread across to my family, right? And that's important. Go make a living, produce. I still love to produce. I love to work. But my idea of what's really important has changed substantially. And I also know that this isn't our first go round, right? This isn't my first walk around the park here, right? 40 times maybe, I don't know, but I've done a couple past lives. And the crazy thing is they're all the same players, just in different roles, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so that's soul family, right? Soulmate, I think, is a hallmark thing, but I believe in twin flames and I believe in soul families.
Yeah.
And I know mine, half of my family's on the other side already, and I know I'm going to see them again. And it'll be a
Yeah.
heck of a party when I make that transition.
Yeah.
I kind of fill in the circle at that point, right?
Mhm.
The circle gets connected, and that's going to be pretty dang good.
Yeah. And what a beautiful opportunity to serve.
Oh, what a beautiful opportunity to serve. I served prior to this event. I served myself and my family. Now I serve God
Yeah.
and his family
Yeah. And feeling the love the entire way.
all the time. And I got to be honest, we talked earlier, for all this metaphysical knowledge that I have, there's days that it's just hard to shake the heartbreak,
Yeah.
left foot, right foot. The difference is after 8 years, that time of that intense pain has dissipated. It's shorter. It still comes and it still takes me out at the knees, but it's a shorter time when I'm back on my feet, right? And I know my son's with me and loves me and says things like, I'm still here. What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And, I look at it, this is what I'm doing right now.
this is.
This is
When
what
I'm
I'm
supposed to
doing
be doing
right
something
now.
else, God will tell me.
If I was supposed to be doing something else, I'd be doing it.
I just follow the breadcrumbs, Kimberly. That's what I do.
Me too. I love that saying. Well, this has been such a beautiful conversation. I have such a heart for you and the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving us your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for
Yeah.
spreading the word.
And I will have Joe's information, his website, the books, everything listed in the description box down below. If you have questions or if you're wanting to connect with someone, take advantage of his offer. Get in touch with them. He's really, he has walked the path of having that communication. And my belief, and I bet Joe's is too, is that everyone can do it.
Oh my God, everyone can do this. If
Yeah.
I can do it, Kimberly, everyone.
The guy with the crew cut, if he
The
can
guy with
do
the
it,
crew cut. If the guy with the crew cut with the bent nose can do it, y'all can do it.
y'all can do it. All right. Well, with that, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you next time.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Kimberly. Bye-bye.
Yeah. I hope you enjoyed this video. Coming up next, this is a good one, or you might really like this one too. Either one of them could be perfect for you. Before you leave, don't forget to subscribe.